Hey kiddos, this is your kind of feedback review for Spiral 1. For these feedback videos, I'm going to go through the sections on a spiral that are just for feedback. So this would be evaluate functions. In fact, that's the only section you took. The goal here is to make some sense of the feedback that I give you, as well as if I notice that some people are all having the same issue, we can talk about what's going on there. Okay, first off, I want to talk a little bit about the stuff at the top of the page. Here we have three different functions. We've got f of x, which is given to you as an equation, g of x, which is given to you as a table, and I apologize for the messiness of this table. You guys have this in front of you, so you can probably see it a little bit better. And then h of x is given to you as a graph. One of the challenges of this particular topic is you've got to identify which function you're working with. And then you have to understand what you have to do with that. So that's going to be my emphasis for talking about these topics today. Okay, first off, we've got to find f of 4. So I'm thinking about, okay, I got to find function f, and I see that that's the equation. I'm just going to write f of x is equal to 25 minus 3x, just so I have that there. And I know if I have an equation, f of 4 means find the value of the function f of x when x equals 4. So I'm going to plug it in. So this becomes 25 minus 3 times 4. And when you do this out, that's minus 12. 25 minus 12 is going to be 13. For the second one, and here we had some issues with being able to interpret the graph. That's on me. This was not an appropriately done graph by any means. The big issue was that you couldn't actually read the graph because these lines were all too light. You couldn't even see the y-axis. So before we begin, I just want to clearly identify things. This is the x-axis. And your graph might look a little bit different. I think I cut off more on tops to fit stuff. And this is the y-axis. So that means that the points on here, and by the way, every 2 bars is 1. Oh, I'm still thick marker. Is it a thin one? Let's change that. That means here's 2. Since that's negative 2, this is negative 1. If this is negative 2, this is negative 1. So the second issue, I think, with understanding this graph was trying to interpret each of these tick marks that you could barely see as 1 instead of them being 2 apiece, or 2 per 1. Okay, so find h of 2. Because we're talking about h, we know we're using this graph. H of 2 means the height when x equals 2. And for this, we're talking about the graph. And for that, I'm going to highlight this in yellow so that we're real clear about what we're talking about. Okay. So what we're doing is we're looking for when x is 2. I'm going to find where this graph is, and it's right there when x is 2. There's my 2 line. And at this place, we have a height of negative 1. So the answer to this problem is negative 1. Depending on what you interpreted these tick marks to be, depending on what you interpreted the x-axis to be, I saw a lot of answers that were negative 2 or positive 1, and those were incorrect, but not really your fault. This is not a good graph. For number 3, we're talking about g of a, and I mentioned that you could change this to g of x equals 3. This is not a great way to do things mathematically, but based on where we are in math, that's okay. G is our table, so we're looking at this guy, and if g of x equals 3, that means that the output equals 3, and we want to find a value for x. We want to find the input that makes this true. And in this case, the output is 3 when the input is 4. So I would have accepted this as x equals 4 or a equals 4 if you left that variable in. I also would have accepted this as g of 4 is equal to 3. That would be fine. or just if you wrote 4, you'd get credit for that as well. Okay, finally we've got problem 4. F of b is equal to 10, so we know we're talking about our equation again. And again, you could just change this to x instead of b, and that's going to make this a little bit easier for you to work with, so you don't have extra variables kicking around. So if f of x, I'm going to write the equation again, equals 25 minus 3x, and f of x is equal to 10, what I'm going to do is take a look at this equation, now that it's equal to 10, and solve that equation. So we're going to do minus 25 to both sides. You get negative 3x is equal to negative 15. You can divide both sides by negative 3 and get that x is equal to positive 5. You can't really see that because I'm running out of space. And this is going to make this a little bit fun. So x is equal to positive 5. One of the big mistakes I saw was just losing a negative. That's not a big deal. The other thing I saw people doing was that this became f of 10, which is not what you're trying to do here.